Today's shirt, for anyone curious, comes from an artist named HomoCats. This video is about potential alternatives for collectors who, for one reason or another, may not be willing or able to get a bunch of new toys. I'm primarily coming at this from a budget mindset, mostly because I currently don't really have a toy budget, but it's just a handful of other things you can do with toys you already have to kind of keep things fresh, keep yourself invigorated, keep yourself interested in collecting these transforming robot toys without resorting to buying more. Which, again, it's more in the idea that, like, if you either don't want to or can't. Like, you know, space, money, personal boycott, whatever. And I want to start with the mostly like the easiest and cheapest stuff and go up into the more expensive stuff as we progress, which ideally will still be relatively affordable. But to start, I'm going to do the simplest of simple things to help just maybe reinvigorate a toy here and there, something that you can, you know, it gives you an excuse to play with the figure a little bit more often than simply transforming it once or twice and putting it on a shelf. Fan moding. The reason I'm using Mechard Griffinx here as an example of fan moding is because, well, this is probably the best example of fan moding I have currently in the collection because I've been downsizing a lot recently. Also, there is a video I made on this guy, Fan Mode Friday, which I tried to make a thing and then stopped after like 2 videos because I just don't have that many things that I fan mode. But look at this guy. He's pretty cool, as is. I'm just not a fan of what's going on with the shoulders here. They're kind of goofy looking. These are very out there. This is something that I feel like you can do with a lot of different figures. If there's something about it that just doesn't quite appeal to you, just, you know, take a minute, look at it, think about how the joints work, and see if there's something you might be able to come up with that, if you adjust things just a little bit, makes you feel a little better about them. And for Griffinx here, it's very, very simple. It's all in the shoulders. So what I do for fan moding this guy is I just bring the shoulder up. It does click into place, but I just bring it up a little bit, and then bring the arm and the wing down a bit. And then this goofy shoulder ends up looking more like a cape almost. And I just think this looks a little bit cleaner, looks a little bit cooler, and it also makes his overall footprint on the shelf a lot less obnoxious to deal with. So instead of being like 1.5 feet long, it's more, you know, or almost 2 feet really. It's more like, you know, it's the width of his shoulders, so it works a little bit better on a shelf. Fan moding, I think, is probably the most effective and least cost-intensive way to liven things up a little bit. If not specifically to liven up the collection, then at the very least it might help you mentally parsing your collection, let's say, because I feel like I'm not the only one where if you collect enough of these things, it all starts to kind of blend together. You kind of start to maybe get a little bit burned out. You'll still appreciate looking at them on the shelf, but you don't really have any desire to take them off the shelf most of the time. And finding a figure that maybe you're not entirely in love with and figuring out if maybe there's a way you can adjust things here and there to make them just look a little bit cooler to you, I think that can make a huge difference, and it doesn't cost anything. Next up is another thing that is pretty much free as long as you have the right tools. You might need tools to pull this off. The tools themselves, usually not expensive, and sometimes you might need supplies too, like let's say silicone-based shock oil or future-based floor polish, but I am talking about modification. And for this example, we are using this particular Transformers Adventure Nemesis Prime that I have, because this is based on the RID Optimus Prime mold. It's a neat figure, it's very simple, but it is neat, and it looks amazing in Nemesis colors, but he's got these big blocks on his fists, which are just kind of annoying to deal with. They don't look great. So this guy in particular, there is a mod that you can do to this, and I'm going to try to remember to link to Pia's video that talks about how to do this. This particular one, the Nemesis one, I was able to pull it off, but it was not as easy as it appeared to be in Pia's video on the regular Optimus Prime figure, and I did end up cracking the tabs on the wheels. I ended up having to kind of re-glue them slightly, and that resulted in this one wheel being, it still turns, but it's way too snug, so it doesn't really roll freely anymore, which kind of stinks. But it's a pretty simple mod. You just pop off the wheels, pop off these little panels, trim a little plastic, and you're good to go. And with the proper plastic trimmed off and everything stuck back together, you can actually rotate this panel back and out of the way. And it's a small change, but it makes a difference. It does help with the aesthetics here, and they just sit back like that. You can flip them forward for the vehicle mode and everything's cool. You don't have to worry about it staying together in truck mode. Point is, there are things you can do to figures you currently own to modify them to, maybe make them a little bit more appealing for you. There are all kinds of things. Like if you've got loose joints, you can use floor polish to tighten them, the right kind of floor polish. If you've got tight joints, you can use silicone-based shock oil to loosen them. You can trim things away. I would advise looking into it first, or possibly at least paying really close attention to the joints so you know what you're doing, to trim certain things away in order to add articulation or increase range in articulation. But the point is, with the right tools like screwdrivers and the right kind of floor polish, the silicone shock oil, maybe an X-Acto knife, which if you're younger watching this, do not try to use the sharp tools on your own. Get someone to help you, get like a parent or an older sibling or someone to help you. It's very, very worthwhile to do for a lot of things. Sometimes it feels like it's necessary, unfortunately, but there are things you can do with minimal cost to just revitalize some of the figures you like. If there's a figure you really like that you just wish the arms could go out a little bit more, maybe there's some way you can address that. Something worth looking into. Another thing you can do to revitalize your figures is customization, and one of the easiest ways to customize your figures, but also very effective, is Reprolabels. This just gives me an excuse to bring this guy out again. I just love Fans Hobby's version of Dreadwing. It continues to be my favorite third-party figure that I own, and I can't really explain why. I just love this, so any excuse I have to put this guy in front of the camera again and talk about him for even just a second, I'll take. Reprolabels are great because, one, you just buy a sheet of stickers and then you can apply them. It requires basically no tools if you don't want. You could use a toothpick, which those are either really cheap or you're probably going to have some at home anyway. Or there's what I do. I have a pair of tweezers that I use because I just think it's nice having that extra level of control. And the reason I recommend, and other people recommend, using some kind of tool like a toothpick or tweezers or something is because our fingers, even if we just wash them, have like natural oils on them. It's just part of being human. And if those oils get onto the stickers, that can affect whether or not they stay down well. Granted, that can still be an issue even if you're careful and don't touch stuff with your fingers, but it helps to use tools. But anyway, Reprolabels are a great option if you don't have the interest or patience or skill or desire to do any painting. Another great thing about Reprolabels is you are allowed to make mistakes and they're relatively easy to fix. If you put a sticker down and you realize it's in the wrong spot, it's usually not that hard to carefully peel the sticker back up and reapply it, especially if you haven't really smashed it down to try and solidify it in place yet. And even then, sometimes if the stickers are down, I notice this happens a lot with the eyes, where the eyes are usually kind of curved. So if you put a sticker down and it doesn't quite line up, you can just kind of very carefully nudge it while it's in place until it ends up looking a little bit better. Another bonus, you don't have to use all the stickers. So if there are certain details in a sticker set that you really like, but there are other ones you don't, you simply just don't have to put the stickers you don't like on the figure. You can just use the ones you want. A lot of the newer Reprolabel sets usually offer options too, so not only do you get to pick and choose which ones you want to use and or not use on a figure, you also get that option to decide whether, what color do you want the eyes to be? Do you want to use this deco or that deco? Which kind of faction logo do you want to use? You usually get options, which is really nice. And Reprolabels, by and large, are relatively affordable. It depends. There are some sets that are costly, but those are usually for big figures, like big sets, Titan class figures, that kind of thing. But even so, they're always going to be cheaper than the figure itself. And then the second part of the whole customization thing is, of course, painting. Now, I want to say upfront, I did not paint this. This is a custom that I bought from Deceptipunk Customs off of eBay. They do amazing work. Point is, this is not my custom. Someone else made this custom, but it is a custom, and custom paint is the other option. And you can do a lot with just a minimal amount of effort. This is not a minimal amount of effort, but this is just the example I'm using. The things you can do with just a little bit of paint has been great. I've got, actually, let me get him out of the thing here. I've still got my Generation Selects Shattered Glass Ultra Magnus. I cannot explain why I love this figure so much, but I do. But I did just a minimal amount of customizing on him, like paint customization. He does have Reprolabels, but even before I got the Reprolabels, I did very minimal customizing, and it helped a lot. Not sure how well it's going to come across on camera, but I painted the eyes gold. Specifically the eyes on this head, because it comes with two heads. Did not require a lot of time, effort, money, or even skill. And yeah, Reprolabels definitely are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here, but like just painting the eyes sometimes can make a huge difference. You don't even need to be good at painting. I'm not good at painting. I'm terrible at it. The only thing I have is like a semi-steady hand and a magnifier that I use on my desk sometimes. Weathering is way simpler than you would think. Like, there are different methods for it, but the last thing I did that involved some weathering was just getting some black acrylic paint, matte black, mixing it with a little bit of water so it's a little bit, watered down, obviously, and then just kind of brushing it all over the figure where I wanted things to look worn and dirty and stuff, and then you could either leave it or kind of wipe over it, remove any kind of uniformity, make it look maybe a little bit like, I don't know, like it's dirty or something like that, if that's the look you're going for. But like, it can make a big difference to change the look of a figure or like make it more yours. And depending on how many figures you have, depending on how much you may want or may not want to invest in the time, invest in changing the look of your figures. Like, you could do this to everything you own if you really wanted to, or like pick and choose ones that you think like, oh, this would look better if this was in this color, or like, oh, there's all this unpainted gray plastic here, let me add just like a little bit of detail here and there. And like, you can just do that. You probably want to do acrylics because acrylics are water-based, so they're much easier to undo if you decide you make a mistake or you want to clean something up or whatever, and you're far less likely to damage the plastic. That being said, the paint being water-based means it doesn't lock in as solidly as enamel paints do, so you do have that possibility of paint scraping off and stuff, but there are ways around that. But the point is, paint customization is another great thing you can do to just breathe a little bit more life into your interest in the toys that you currently have. And now we come to the fifth and last, for the sake of this video anyway, thing that you could potentially do instead of buying new toys to keep your enthusiasm for the hobby up and, save on shelf space and potentially save on a little bit of money at the same time. That being said, whether or not this actually ends up saving money compared to the cost of a brand new figure remains to be seen and depends a lot on what companies you go with. I am talking about upgrade kits. Upgrade kits didn't used to be a thing, really. It kind of became a thing shortly before I got back into collecting about a decade ago. But they've become more popular, and then they kind of fell off again, and then they're still around. It depends, it's mostly just DNA design. There are individual people who are creating their own custom upgrade kits, like 3D printed stuff. You've got non-F, then you've got DNA. DNA could be its whole own video, and that's one of the ideas that I had that I put off because I didn't want to be too negative. DNA upgrades, depending on the upgrade, depending on the figure, depending on when the upgrade came out, can be a really nice way to relatively affordably upgrade, as the name implies, a figure or set that you really like. Here is Unite Warriors Devastator with the DNA upgrades, which elongate the forearms, give you much more articulated hands, you get the shoulders that stick out now, there are some gap fillers for the thighs that are there, and I believe the hip panels in the front are new too. You get a new head. You can't see it from here, but the Mixmaster foot expansion thing that makes it look more like a traditional cement mixer, or more like the G1 toy, basically. This upgrade kit is cool. It also has problems. It's also not what I would call cheap. It is I want to say this was probably somewhere around 50 to 60 bucks for the upgrades, which for a Titan class figure, for all the stuff that this does, I don't think that's completely unfounded. But I'm just going to touch on it briefly. But the problem with DNA is I feel like the company knows it's the only game in town, or basically the only game in town at this point, and is using that as an excuse to charge, let's be real, unreasonable amounts for some of these upgrade kits. A lot of DNA upgrades are cost prohibitive these days, and in more than one instance, you're paying more for the kit than you would have for the figure on its own. And I think that is a terrible business practice, but again, I don't want to go too far off on a tangent. Point is, there are options out there. It's not just DNA, but sometimes you can find the DNA kits for a good price. Sometimes DNA themselves actually prices things reasonably. Sometimes they make for good ways to just kind of beef up a figure that you already have that you really like. I think Unite Warriors Devastator with the upgrades looks fantastic. And really, that's just kind of the basis of this whole concept for the video. It's the idea of you're taking, rather than buying a new toy, which again could be due to not having the same budget, or not having physical space, or simply not wanting to buy new stuff for whatever reason. It takes what you already have and keeps you engaged with it. And I don't know, I just think that's neat. It certainly helped me, because my whole side thing, my whole way to engage with the toys beyond simply getting them and messing with them when I first get them, is making videos on them. Now that I've made videos on everything that I own that I'm willing to make videos of, I don't have that excuse anymore. So it just made me think, like, what other things have I done? Can I do? Can I maybe suggest in a video? And yeah, those are the 5 that I came up with. I feel like that couldn't possibly be all the different things you could do. So by all means, if you've got any ideas, feel free to chime in down below. I know that there are people out there who do like stop motion video with their toys. That's super cool. Any other thing you can think of, feel free to chime in, because I'm pretty sure it goes beyond fan moding, customizing, modifying, and buying upgrade kits. Thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you in whatever the next video ends up being about. Haven't decided yet.